The Whispering Well. When I was 8, we moved into the kind of house that had history clinging to it, like damp moss. It was a sprawling, neglected property outside the city limits, with a front yard full of tired oak trees and a massive, untamed backyard that backed right up to a dense patch of woods. It was in that backyard that I first noticed the well. It wasn't one of those picturesque fairy tale wells with a little roof and a bucket on a rope. This was heavy, serious business. A thick circular slab of gray concrete resting flush against the ground, entirely sealing the mouth of the old stone well beneath it. The concrete was deeply stained with minerals and covered in patches of dark green lichen, suggesting it hadn't been moved in decades. Everyone called it the Wishing Well, but it looked less like a fountain of hope and more like a massive, forgotten stopper in the earth. My father assured me it was perfectly safe. The stone casing went down 20 feet, and the concrete lid weighed hundreds of pounds. "Sealed tighter than a drum," he said, slapping the cold surface. "Just don't try to play on it." But I was drawn to it. It represented a secret, a dark vertical tunnel that plunged into the hidden underworld of our quiet property. I'd sit near it during the long summer afternoons, tracing the cracks in the concrete with a stick, listening. The sounds started subtly, tied directly to the weather. Our first big summer storm came one July, a violent affair with sheet lightning and rain that hit the windows with the force of thrown pebbles. I was tucked into my bed, thrilled by the cacophony, until I heard something that didn't belong to the storm. It was faint, a recurring wet, low noise, a kind of sucking sound. Shawak, shawak. It was muffled, heavy, and sounded like the deep, wet exhalation of something buried. I rationalized it immediately. It was the septic tank. It was the drain overflow. It was the neighbor's sump pump. My mind provided a dozen logical explanations, yet none of them felt satisfying. I pressed my ear to the floor, and the sound seemed to shift, moving under the subfloor, heavier now, and slightly metallic, like a wet cast iron lid being shifted an inch at a time. The next morning, the well was unchanged. The concrete lid was firmly in place, but the air around it felt colder than the rest of the yard, and the earth immediately surrounding the lip of the concrete was darker, muddier, even though the heavy rain had long since been absorbed by the grass. I didn't tell my parents right away. Childhood is often a series of private, strange discoveries, and I treated the sound as my own strange, unsettling phenomenon. But the incidents began to escalate, blurring the line between the outside and the inside of the house. The wet sounds migrated. On dry nights, when the well should have been silent, I would hear the same shh-walk sound, but now it came from the ground floor bathroom. It was always after 2 a.m., the dead hour when the house held its breath. I crept out once, flashlight in hand, and stood outside the bathroom door. The sound was unmistakably coming from the drain of the pedestal sink. A low, wet, powerful suctioning noise, like something enormous was slowly drawing liquid down a very narrow pipe. I was too terrified to open the door, retreating only when the sound was violently interrupted by a loud, echoing gulp, followed by absolute silence. The next day, my mother complained about a strange, dark ring inside the porcelain basin of the sink, an oily residue that wouldn't scrub out. She blamed hard water or chemicals, but I knew the drain had coughed something up, something black and viscous from deep within the plumbing. Then there was Barney. Barney was our golden retriever, a dog famous for his boundless, joyful lack of fear. He adored the backyard, treating the lawn and woods like his personal kingdom. But one afternoon, I watched him charge towards the back patio, chasing a butterfly, only to skid to a halt 10 feet from the well. He stopped as if he'd hit an invisible wall, his tail instantly dropping. He began to growl, a deep trembling sound I'd never heard from him, staring fixedly at the well cover. He didn't bark, he just emitted that low, furious threat. His hackles raised until he finally tucked his tail and bolted, scrambling back to the safety of the house, refusing to go back out for the rest of the day. My parents noticed his sudden terror. "He must have seen a snake," Dad suggested, trying to coax Barney back into the yard with a treat. Barney wouldn't budge past the threshold. The house became a space of containment, and the basement door became a new focal point of dread. Our basement was unfinished, damp concrete floor, low ceiling, and a perpetual smell of earth and rust. After the incident with Barney, I started finding small, dark handprints on the inside of the basement door. They weren't clearly defined, just a smudge of sticky, wet darkness. 3 distinct prints, small, almost child-sized, but elongated, with fingers that looked too long, pressed lightly against the white wood. I showed them to my mother, trembling. She rubbed them off instantly, a look of tired annoyance replacing her curiosity. "It's mildew, honey. This old house has humidity problems. The wood gets damp." But I remembered the metallic sound, the oily sink residue, and the fact that the basement was the closest, darkest entry point from the ground up. I started taping the door shut at night with masking tape, a ridiculous, futile gesture that nevertheless made me feel marginally safer. In the morning, the tape would sometimes be slightly torn, a clean vertical rip down the center, but the door remained closed. The climax of this period came during a massive, week-long system of storms. The ground became saturated, and the whole house felt heavy with water. One Tuesday evening, my parents were out at a late dinner, leaving me in charge of my younger brother, Timmy, who was asleep upstairs. The storm outside was relentless. I sat in the living room, trying to read, when the sounds began in earnest. It wasn't the slow, shook walk anymore. It was a violent, desperate churning. It was coming from every pipe, every drain, every inch of copper tubing in the walls. The kitchen sink drains started making a loud, sucking, gurgling noise, like a lung fighting for air underwater. I ran to the back window and looked outside. The yard was a mess of wind and rain. Then I looked at the well. The well was doing something I had never seen. The heavy concrete lid was vibrating subtly, sending tiny sprays of dirty water up from the hairline crack, where the lid met the stone casing. It was breathing. It was trying to open. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. I turned towards the darkened hallway leading to the basement stairs, feeling that cold, internal chill I knew too well. I didn't see a shadow or a figure, but as I glanced down at the hallway rug, I saw it. A small, slow-moving trail of black muddy water creeping from beneath the basement door, pooling like spilled ink on the pale carpet. I heard a sudden loud clang from the backyard, followed by a heavy, scraping sound. It sounded like something had been moved. I was frozen by the kitchen sink, which was now gurgling so loud it seemed to be screaming. I looked out the window again, peering through the rain-streaked glass. The well lid was still in place, but beside it, a figure stood, silhouetted against the blurry backdrop of the woods. It was tall and thin, covered in a slick sheath of mud and water, and it was looking directly at the house. Its head was craned unnaturally. I only saw it for a second. A dark impression reflected in a small puddle beneath the oak tree, before it ducked or melted back into the shadows of the storm. I didn't wait. I grabbed Timmy from his room and dragged him, half asleep and complaining, to the upstairs linen closet, barricading the door with a laundry hamper. I sat there in the dark, curled around my brother, listening not to the storm, but to the frantic, watery, slurp-pull-clang sounds coming from the walls and the ceiling. My parents returned hours later to find me shaking in the closet, the house fine, save for a few fallen branches and a small, perfectly round depression in the saturated mud near the well cover. Dad swore it was just the heavy rain causing sink stress, but he found the muddy water trail by the basement door, and he didn't call it mildew this time. He just looked uneasy. A week later, without telling us, he hired a crew. They didn't just seal the well. They poured several cubic yards of concrete directly into the casing, filling it from the bottom up and capping it with a massive, permanent dome. The process took all day, and Dad watched the whole thing, saying very little. The sounds stopped immediately. The air in the backyard was normal. Barney played near the spot again. We lived in that house for 7 more years without incident, but the memory is an aquifer of dread, always there. I am an adult now, living in a modern apartment building, but the sound of heavy rain still makes me jump. I refuse to live on the ground floor. When the city's plumbing groans late at night, I listen to the drains, knowing that somewhere, deep in the earth, something enormous that wanted out is now trapped behind a solid wall of concrete, waiting for the water to dissolve its cage, listening forever for the sound of my name.